that we are facing is one that we won't necessarily be comfortable with.
I honestly think we're reaching an adapt or die point.
There is no reason to believe our present stage of development is the end of the line. What we evolve to may not look like the present human race any more than we are like the apes, but they will be our direct descendants.
We've met the enemy and it is us.
Great hulking factories, monuments to efficiency and the golden promise of the industrial age. This was high technology, circa 1940. But in less than a lifetime, the future that was built for us is obsolete. Hello, I'm Tim White, and on this special edition of Sightings, the future. Where do we go from here?
On this special edition of Sightings, the future, genetic perfection achieved.
We can expect biological and electronic components to come together in the future to create superorganisms that will be a new form of life.
The future, human beings become part machine.
What if we've got this nice interface between us and the machine which allows us to think in the machine world? Then we're effectively a different species.
The future, secrets of immortality are revealed.
Perhaps in the future you'll go to the doctor and simply get a shot by which you can begin to change your genetic makeup to perhaps extend the human lifespan.
The future, silicon chips and human brain cells mate.
The project currently is to develop computer chips that will function just like a part of the brain.
The future, artificial intelligence, humanoid robots, behavior modification, warring machines, replaceable body parts. Download your brain. Live forever.
Imagine a whole body that's there and can't be hurt, and yet it still has your soul and your brain in it. It's a whole new human race.
Or are we engineering our own demise?
In the future battlefield, I'll be out there and a Terminator robot will walk up to me with a huge weapon, shake my hand, and then it'll blow me away.
It's not fiction. The future is now. But is it the end of humanity or the next step in human evolution?
Stuff that sounds insane right now is probably going to happen in another 15 or 20 years.
It's a Sighting special, in depth and beyond. Bioperfection, building the new human race.
This silent, rusting dinosaur of the 20th century is extinct, as foretold not by the great thinkers of our day, but by street corner prophets. The end is near, they proclaim. And as the 21st century approaches, some say the end is now. This is the future, as predicted by the prophets of the past. War, fire, panic, plague. And in this frightening millennial vision, it's 2 minutes till apocalypse. Chief among these doomsday predictors is Michel Nostradamus. He's been dead for more than 400 years, but his prophetic words still resonate, perhaps because Nostradamus's predictions have been so accurate, perhaps because his vision of the 21st century is so disturbing.
Nostradamus went into print during the 16th century, and he has stayed in print continuously for those 400 years until today. I believe the main reason why Nostradamus has been so popular is because he's been so successful.
Author John Hogue has spent more than 20 years interpreting the cryptic prophecies of Nostradamus.
The interest people have now for 4.5 centuries almost of Nostradamus comes from two factors. He's so obscure that every generation can pin some idea of the future on him, and there are a few hundred of his prophecies that aren't obscure at all, that name names, mention dates, mention things that are beyond chance, which shows that whatever he's hiding behind that witch's brew of syntax may be quantum futures that we can access.
Accessing that future may never be more important than it is right now. According to Nostradamus, the year 1999 is the beginning of the end.
In the year 2000 or thereabouts, something is going to end, but it's not the world. It may be the world that we understand now, but it's not the world outside, it's the world inside.
Is it possible that the 16th century prophet who foretold the rise and fall of the Third Reich has also left us an equally accurate warning about what will happen when the doomsday clock strikes 12? Other ancient systems of prophecy seem to support Nostradamus.
There are many time cycles coming to an end. The most famous is the Mayan calendar. It's also the most accurate. 2012 time ends.
The Maya calendar runs out in the year 2012. Is this a message from the past about our future? Is 2012 the end of time or the end of us?
What I think about that is that time, at least as far as the ancient and dead Mayans are concerned, is ending. But time will not end. Time will renew. A new cycle is coming, a new age.
And strikingly similar predictions about this new age have been passed down for centuries from shaman to shaman in the remote Andes.
Sabíamos que iba a haber una etapa de oscuridad en el Gran Tahuantinsuyo.
When the Spanish came, we knew there was going to be a period of darkness. That period, when the Spanish arrived, is known as the Ninth Pachacute, and our leaders knew it would come. My people knew that a time of darkness was coming.
Don Vidal Sanchez is a Peruvian shaman whose ancestors were part of the great Inca nation of Peru. His people are the people of Machu Picchu. He is descended from prophets who foretold their own demise at the hands of conquistadors and who passed down to Don Sanchez their vision of the next millennium.
The era of the Ninth Pachacute ended in 1992, after 500 years, and then began the 10th Pachacute.
El 10º Pachacute. El 2013.
According to the Mayas and the Incas, the Earth must change by the year 2013. This new era will last for 4.5 million years. And after that will be the end of that era, but not the end of the world.
For indigenous peoples around the world, the Earth continues to turn and nature continues to take its course. Their prophecies are based on the inevitabilities of their natural world. But in a world ruled by technology, who is looking into our future?
I thought that if we could predict the future, we would be less anxious about it.
In the late 20th century, one man has brought technology and prophecy together for the first time. Terrence McKenna is a writer and researcher who has developed a vision of the future that is alarming in its eerie similarity to what the Maya calendar has predicted. McKenna's calendar, called the Time Wave, is based on the Chinese fortune-telling system called the I Ching. And according to the Time Wave, the end is very near.
The creation of the time wave arose out of thinking about the I Ching, thinking about the way the hexagrams of the I Ching are arranged. And out of that came a mathematical algorithm that obviously wanted to be a calendar. And when I looked at it as a calendar, I saw that it described the ebb and flow of change in history.
In the I Ching, mathematical patterns called hexagrams trace the ups and downs of human life. But when applied to the timeline of history, the I Ching seems to trace the ups and downs of all humanity.
Here, 1356, the Black Death, a third of the population of Europe, dies. And here, the culmination of the Italian Renaissance in 1492 with the discovery of the New World. Over here, the American and the French Revolutions. Here's World War II, and here's us.
McKenna says that his time wave doesn't distinguish between the past and the future, and that it successfully marks all of history's most significant events.
So the predictions of the past give us confidence that what it's saying about the future will also turn out to be true.
On exactly December 21st, 2012, the year the Mayas said would be the end of time, McKenna's time wave calendar dips off the chart into infinity. Is this the apocalypse?
I predict the most novel event in the history of the world in 2012. I don't see a doomsday. I see enormous concentration of novel change. And for a conservative mind, that might look like doomsday, but it isn't doomsday. It's simply that we are moving deeper and deeper into uncharted territory, novel territory, and that's frightening to some people and exhilarating to others.
So where exactly is this uncharted territory on the millennial frontier? Many great thinkers say it can be found just beyond the intersection of humanity and technology.
In the last 2,000 years of science, we've been observers to the dance of nature. We've wondered, why is it that things grow? Why is it the sun shines? Why is it that our brains can function? For the last 2,000 years, those were unsolvable mysteries. In the next period of time, we will be able to manipulate matter, life, and intelligence almost at will.
I do think we are at a crossroads. I think that we are rapidly maturing to the point where we might be wise enough to deal with some of the terrible decisions we're going to have to make. We passed one big test. We didn't blow up the world during 50 years of nuclear brinksmanship. That's one for us. Now we're going to have to pass tests dealing with cloning, nanotechnology, organic engineering, biological warfare, the communications revolution. We're going to have to pass all these tests over the course of the next 50 years.
But who will we be in 2012, 2050, and beyond? Will we still be all flesh and blood, or will we be part human, part machine? Will computers control us in the same way that we now dominate and control the animal kingdom? Are we at humanity's end, or is this the beginning of a new stage in the evolution of the species and the planet?
We now have the scientific expertise and the technical capacity to produce paradise or hell on this planet. That's the source of our anxiety about the future, because we know that it belongs to us.
What will we build from the raw materials of the present? How will we configure the world if technology is God and clean rooms are our houses of worship? No one knows, especially since we're only now beginning to understand what the choices are.
Biological perfection, behavior modification. Are we playing genetic roulette, trying to create the new human? Later, rebuilding a species with spare parts. The era of the bionic human is coming.
I could see it happening, and then you're really going to have superhumans.
When Henry Ford perfected the assembly line at the turn of the last century, he single-handedly created an industrial complex that transformed the world. At the turn of the next century, scientists are predicting Ford's assembly line mentality will remain alive and well, cranking out rubber stamp humans.
Up to the past to the present day period of time, we were basically observers of nature. We could only look and wonder about the dance of nature. Today we are becoming master choreographers of nature. We're able to manipulate life for the first time in terms of DNA.
Right now, in thousands of laboratories around the world, scientists, corporations, and governments are manipulating life at the genetic level, creating novel new forms of bacteria and viruses, creating novel new forms of plants, creating new transgenic animals, and now even beginning to use genetic surgery to change the genetic instructions of human beings.
The day is fast approaching when we will no longer be able to let nature take its course, because nature is no match for genetic manipulation.
Through the Human Genome Project, I believe we're really opening the door to looking at our own genetics, and we're going to manipulate it.
Well underway at the National Institutes of Health, the Human Genome Project is a monumental undertaking that is mapping the more than 100,000 genes in the human body.
Any criteria they come up with is still based on the idea of creating a more perfect, more efficient organism, so that you cannot really divorce the discussion of eugenics from this new technology.
Nazi Germany funded the earliest research into eugenics. They attempted to create superior humans by breeding children from exemplary Aryans and by slaughtering millions of people they considered inferior.
I think actually what's very interesting about the Nazis and their appalling attempts at eugenics is that in fact virtually all the science they did was almost entirely useless. None of their genetic or breeding work, I think, has had any impact at all, and so there's an added impetus to protect society from that sort of experimentation.
The Nazis had the point of view that, you know, if you weren't of the right biological type, they were going to kill you or castrate you or something. And that's, to me, loathsome. And as an evolutionary biologist, I think it's a disaster because you need as much variation as you can get.
But if Hitler's diabolical research machine had had today's knowledge of genetics, it may very well have succeeded in creating carbon copy Nazis. And with the imminent breaking of the genetic code, any future manipulator of our human destiny will have control on a molecular level.
By the year 2005, the first human will have a complete readout of all 100,000 or so genes. And by the year 2010, we're going to have many of the 5,000 genetic defects, like Tay-Sachs, sickle cell anemia, cystic fibrosis, completely deciphered. And then by the year 2020, magic is going to happen. By the year 2020, we'll have the ability to have individual genetic printouts.
Even without a complete map of our genetic code, gene manipulation of plants and animals is already underway. From the fruits and vegetables we farm to the pigs and cows we breed, genetic restructuring is commonplace. So how long will it be before someone, somewhere, begins to work on humans?
To clone people, all you have to have is $10,000 and a bachelor's degree in genetic engineering. That's all it takes to begin the process of cloning. So I think there are very large potential dangers if this gets out of control.
The possibility of cloning with humans is imminent. It's going to happen next year, the year after. It's going to happen somewhere very soon.
So, what will our cloned world look like? Will you walk into a bar and see perfect pairs of perfect people?
And we always say our motto in the restaurant is, you can only make a first impression once, we make it twice. And we're looking for triplets now, so we have a pair with a spare, so if one gets sick, we have two left. But we also specialize in single malt scotches, because it's the only single thing we have in the restaurant besides the two of us.
And if one were to have a clone, what would your relationship be to that person?
It's like having your most annoying quality standing next to you for the rest of your life that you can't get rid of. And you can't divorce them.
I think people misunderstand cloning if they think that the second person or the third person who comes into being as a replica of the first is the same person in some way, physically, religiously, spiritually. Religiously, you would say, no, they don't have the same soul, but also physically, you can say they don't have the same brain or brain patterns or the same experiences.
Will we use cloning to create clone drones who can be trained to perform the mundane tasks that we superior humans loathe? Or will we keep a cloned body on ice from which we can harvest spare parts?
The vision actually is of a human sort of biomorph, a brain-dead human being that's grown for body parts, which is really grotesque vision of the future, and it's something that's very, very likely to happen.
And with mice, an elementary form of this kind of biomorphing is happening right now at the University of Southern California. USC researchers may have isolated the genes responsible for pathological violence and have bred them into these mice. They are called super thug mice, and if left alone long enough, these transgenic mutations will tear each other limb from limb.
So we'll have tremendous impact in the future because right now we don't understand that much about the molecular basis of this behavior. And once we understand that, we can design treatment for this behavior and modify the behavior, and that will help the society.
The goal is to breed out sociopathic behaviors and then to breed in those biological qualities humans lack or just want more of.
Within about 10 years or so, we should isolate the main genes concerning aging. And perhaps within 20 years, we'll begin to see the manipulation of these with gene therapy. Perhaps in the future, you'll go to the doctor and simply get a shot, just like you get an antibiotic shot today, or a vaccine, a shot by which you can begin to change your genetic makeup to perhaps extend the human lifespan.
The biological clock is ticking for all of us, and no one understands this better than Dr. Michael Rose. He has spent the last 20 years trying to unlock the genetic code for aging. Ultimately, through breeding experiments with fruit flies, Dr. Rose believes he will be able to slow down or even reverse a process that has always been thought to be irreversible.
Nobody, when I started, knew that people could do what I have been doing for the last 2 decades. Some people still don't. Some people still don't know that aging is something we can easily control, manipulate, and shape, and it's no fundamental deal. Most biologists, myself included, 20 years ago thought aging was a really fundamental preset feature of each particular organism's life. Couldn't change it. Well, we can change it.
The fruit flies that Dr. Rose is breeding now will live twice as long as normal flies. If an equivalent breeding program were applied to humans, we would live for 200 years.
One way to put it is to say when normal flies are 90% dead, 80% of these flies are still alive and leading very vigorous lives. They're acting like young flies, and they act like young flies for a very long time indeed.
Given current advances in gene manipulation and pharmaceutical research, Dr. Rose believes that in the future, it will not be uncommon to meet someone who is 200, 300, or even 400 years old. Consider this. In the last 150 years alone, we've already doubled the human lifespan.
There's almost no question about what's going to happen. Somebody working with some simpler organism, whether it's a mouse or a fruit fly, will discover a particular pathway that is associated with greatly increased lifespan, and they will discover pharmaceuticals that intervene in that pathway so that you can produce the change synthetically without doing a genetic change, and then they will try that pharmaceutical on humans.
While science continues to make tremendous strides in life extension experiments, relatively little attention is being paid to what impact those experiments will have on society and on the planet itself. We posed that dilemma to one of the greatest thinkers of the 20th century, physicist Dr. Stephen Hawking.
If we want to live forever, there's an awful lot to fix. Anyway, living forever wouldn't be much good. With human development through genetic engineering, one would soon get hopelessly obsolete.
An awful lot of time and money is being spent on genetic engineering and genetic manipulation, while very little has been done to develop a real working code of ethics.
This is the most powerful technology ever conceived by the human race. We now are on the cusp of a new era where we can become the architects, in part, of our own biological destiny. What are the environmental implications, the philosophical, ethical, and moral implications, the social and cultural implication of playing God with the genetic code of the biology of this planet? If you place a genetically engineered bacteria or virus or even a plant into ecosystems and then it runs amok, how do you clean it up? How do you constrain it? How do you bring it back to the lab? So because they're alive, they reproduce, they mutate, they migrate, you can't recall them to the laboratory. We're dealing with ecological roulette every time we place a novel genetically engineered organism into the environment.
What's really frightening is that at this point,
No one's minding the store of human knowledge. It's up to the individuals who are creating the future to decide, is it working? Is it sane? Is it moral?
Coming up next on Sightings, out of disaster, the bionic human is born. It's a future where disability is eliminated with spare parts.
Maybe in 40 years I won't need to worry about an organic hand. Maybe I'll just be able to get some kind of mechanical contrivance.
In the 20th century, machines were the slave of humankind, silent partners, ours to command at the push of a button. Well, now the lines are being blurred because scientists are experimenting with new ways of merging man and machine. The goal? To cheat disability and death. A violent accident, the pilot's fragile body blown apart. In speculative fiction, television, and film, from this disaster would come a bionic human, a cyborg, part man, part machine, a human replicant refashioned in a medical workshop out of spare parts to house a brain that needs a body to survive. And it's happening right now. We may not be quite ready to create the $6 million man, at least not for that price, but we are on the verge of a future where we will not only re-engineer who we are, but also rebuild ourselves in an infinite number of ways. A discus thrower, a surfer, pioneers on the frontier of physical empowerment. Each has been changed, augmented, enhanced, they would tell you, through advances in biological technology. Bionics, prosthetics, and microsurgery are merging and changing lives. Sean Brown is an amateur athlete at Mesa College in Arizona. When he's not competing in track and field and football, Brown is helping to develop new and better body parts based on his personal experiences. Sean has worn a prosthetic left leg since 1991, and in that time he set a number of world records throwing the discus. In fact, Brown throws farther on his prosthetic leg than he ever did before.
When I got a hold of the list of the world records, you know, it was down around 144 feet or something like that, like 44 meters, which I knew I could throw that without even a day of training. So I knew that there was an opportunity for me to come in and establish myself as a dominant discus thrower. And it wasn't just winning at the time, it was breaking a world record. And I was fortunate enough to have 8 consecutive world records.
Nicolette Gibson was born without her right arm. As a child, she was fitted with one of the very first myoelectric prosthetic arms. She sees herself as a biotech pioneer.
I think it's been a benefit growing up with it, actually. Part of it's been that I've overcome it. And so, you know, it gives me a lot of confidence. Like, I can go out there and surf, and I was a professional snowboarder and a nationally ranked tennis player, and I got a lot more attention than anyone else that was a professional snowboarder, because, you know, it was like I'd gone one step further than them.
Tom Guth heads RGP Prosthetics Research Center. For the past 30 years, he has been designing, engineering, and fitting state-of-the-art prostheses for physically active men and women. As a result, Dr. Guth has gotten comfortable with creating the impossible, whether for now or in the near future.
Well, I've always taken an interest in athletes for 2 reasons. One is they're asking me to do things that most prosthetists will tell their amputees they can't do. And so I thought, well, this challenges me because I have to create something for these people that seems impossible. We're working with another doctor over here at a university, and he's mapping the brain, and he was using arm amputees because in our brain we're finding out what makes what function, and what they're trying to do is enhance that. Well, prosthetics will be able to enhance that once they get to the point where they're put on and permanent, more like a Luke Skywalker. So you'd actually have a stronger arm or hand than a normal person.
I'll probably end up, you know, having a better, stronger arm than everyone else out there. I mean, that's kind of what I'm hoping for down the line, when they can make an arm that lets go quickly and that is waterproof, and definitely I'll have superpowers to some extent.
I think what you're going to end up having is a prosthesis implanted on a patient. And the thing that's has been stopping that from happening is the fact that we have no artificial skin that will group up to the regular skin and grow together. I don't know what year that'll happen, but it will happen. And the skin will cover the whole thing, and it'll heal itself if it gets punctured. That's probably where prosthetics will go.
But the day they have it on the market where you can go in and get the bionic leg made and cover it with actual flesh, I'd probably be the first to go for it. Judging by how much it's moved in the last 20 years, it wouldn't be unrealistic to say that it could be in the next 20.
The mechanics of artificial limbs are nearly as sophisticated as real flesh and blood. So the next step for researchers is inevitable.
I thought, well, what's going to happen? Are we going to have limb transplants down the road? Are we going to be generically able to regrow our limbs? We know that the DNA is all there. How come it stops after after birth? How come after a couple of years we don't grow anymore? And actually, I met a few doctors that were working on those projects.
An arm transplant. That's what I really want. Let me know if anyone out there is finding one. That would be ideal.
For Gibson, transplantation seems more like a dream than a realistic possibility. But for engineer Mark Pauline, the seemingly impossible has already happened. While experimenting with an engine and highly volatile fuel, Pauline lost most of his hand in a devastating explosion.
I was tapping a pin out, and it detonated and practically killed me. And it blew all the fingers off of my hand, except for this one, which they were able to reattach. I had a part taken off my back to replace this, and I had a toe from one foot and a toe from another foot placed on my hand where I can see them more easily.
It's not a pretty sight, one which Pauline hopes to rectify by being the first to have a complete hand transplant with breakthrough microsurgery.
I'm the first in line. Once the technology is mature enough that I won't be making a horrible mistake by doing that, I'll be one of the first in line to get someone a cadaver's hand installed. And so I'm looking forward to that.
It is theoretically and technically possible right now to take a donor hand and put it on someone else's body. The issues with that are rejection issues, and there are emotional and psychological issues. The person would have to be looking at somebody else's hand on a daily basis, somebody else's tissue and flesh, and there would certainly be emotional, moral, and ethical implications with that.
And then again, maybe in 40 years I won't need to worry about an organic hand. Maybe I'll just be able to get some kind of mechanical contrivance, which would be that much better. Certainly an interesting horse race.
I think that is a reality, and I think the prosthetics will be implanted. You won't be able to tell the difference. I'd say the year 2050, we'll be getting close to that.
With astounding advances in medical and mechanical technology, and with brilliant and courageous men and women willing to push the biological envelope, it appears that the sky's the limit.
You mean, are you ever going to be able to go to the shelf and get a body part and put it on somebody? Right now, I can't envision that, but you certainly never know. The real issue with that is going to be moral and ethical issues that I think probably are going to need to be dealt with ahead of time.
Some people think that perhaps we are going to be creating our future bodies. Perhaps one of these days we will merge with our creation. Already it's possible to have artificial hands, artificial legs made out of steel. Maybe one of these days we'll trade in bodies of flesh for bodies of steel, because that will give us, in some sense, a form of immortality.
I could see it happening, and then you're really going to have superhumans, because if they, it starts with an arm that gives me more power. I mean, imagine a whole body that's there and can't be hurt and waterproof and stronger, and yet it still has your soul and your brain in it. It's a whole new human race, right?
At the University of Cambridge, some of humanity's most basic prejudices are being redefined for the future. Among them, what is disability? At the Department for Applied Mathematics and Theoretical Physics, a man whose body is racked by disease can still communicate his revolutionary discoveries about the birth of the universe. Dr. Stephen J. Hawking has Lou Gehrig's disease. He cannot speak, can move only a few muscles, and yet his brilliant mind is undamaged. He communicates to the world through a process of word selection on a computer, which then translates the signal to voice synthesizer.
I would expect the total Hamiltonian would be gauge invariant.
A newer version uses the world's smallest Pentium computer designed at Cambridge Adaptive Communications. Here, they specialize in freeing the mind from the constraints of an uncooperative body.
It's all about allowing people who may be trapped because of their physical disabilities. It's going to allow them to start communicating with the outside world. I think it all helps towards kind of making disabled people more equal.
And now, Cambridge Adaptive Communications is taking Dr. Hawking's communication system one step further. They've put a computer directly into a man's brain.
What this gentleman's had put into his brain is a small sensor on the surface of his brain that is going to pick up signals from him thinking.
Paralyzed from the neck down in a motorcycle accident, Peter Gannicott is the first person to have a silicon chip implanted directly into his brain.
There's a relay board and various interface bits of electronics inside his body, and it's actually just sending that as a radio signal, which can then be just translated into a switch press.
The switch is designed to function just like Dr. Hawking's clicker. But before it can, the challenge will be to train Gannicott's mind to manipulate the chip in his brain through the electrical impulses of thought alone, a true merging of man and machine. At USC, another team of researchers is attempting to also merge man and machine. But this experiment goes one giant step further. The goal is to replace dysfunctional brain cells with computer chips.
The project currently is to develop computer chips that will function just like a part of the brain called the hippocampus, which is responsible for forming new memories.
It's the part of the brain you need to learn a new word, to associate a name with a face, or to remember a phone number. What these scientists are doing is creating mathematical models of these functions and then duplicating them in a computer. Once the computer can mimic these functions, it may be possible to download them back into a damaged brain.
What we're now doing is trying to develop a brand new kind of computer chip that will serve as the interface between this computer model that we have and the real brain. And so the idea is to develop a set of computer chips that will mimic a brain function, and then to be able to plug that computer model back into the brain to essentially take the place of damaged brain regions or of dysfunctional brain regions, and to replace brain parts. We're building replacement parts for the brain, basically.
The long-term goal is to implant the silicon neurons into living brain or living spinal cord. A real challenge is how then now to bring biological neurons to interface and connect with the silicon neurons. To do that, what we've begun to do is to grow neurons onto these silicon chips that have electrodes placed on top of them.
Yes, that's right. We are now growing brain cells on computer chips.
We're doing that so that we can create this interface between real brain cells and our computer chips, and it's through that kind of interface that we hope to connect our computer models back up to the brain.
Who will be a candidate for this new computer-brain interface? Will the technology be used only for the severely disabled, or is it possible that the vast majority of end users will be people who simply want to be smarter?
I think the more that we learn about how the brain works and are able to translate that information into the silicon neurons, we have the real potential then to step back and ask, well, not only replacing brain parts, but attempting to enhance what might not be working as well in one brain as in the other.
The tantalizing possibility that your brain will one day contain everything from the Library of Congress to your personal address book is exciting to some, but frightening to others, who caution that brain chips could lead to mind control and the ability of hostile forces to track you down wherever you are in the world.
I think eventually some of us will choose to have chips planted in our brains. I think some of us will choose to have little optic things stuck in their eyes. I think some of us will have metal plates in our heads. A great many people will choose to do a great many things. And you know what? We'll look at these things the way we now look at our car, at our telephone, as things that we're not shocked by, that we wouldn't want to live without, but we'll tell ourselves, I could live without this if I had to. We'll get used to it.
Coming up on Sightings, creating super machines capable of putting humanity out of business.
what does the idea of an intelligent machine mean for the future of mankind?
And later, will a new race of robots rule the world better than us?
We humans should be creative while we can. We may soon be overtaken.
The worldwide domination of computer technology is touted as a revolution in a box. But it's wise to remember that in every revolution there's a winner and a loser. And if the computers emerge victorious, what kind of world will they create for us? Everyone, it seems, has their own predictions about what the future holds for our relationship with the computer. But predictions, even scientific ones, are just guesses. There's only one thing for sure. Computers are going to get a whole lot smarter.
There's something called Moore's Law.
Moore's Law states that the power of the computer doubles every 18 months.
Now, if you project now into the future, Moore's Law states that probably within 30 to 50 years, we will have machines as fast and as powerful as the human brain.
With this rapid advancement of computer intelligence comes the threat that this intelligence will become greater than our own, alive and unstoppable through the internet.
Maybe how we'll know if and when the internet is a living system is when it tells us that so. And it'll also let us know if it wants to take over or if it wants to unite with us in some form of feral intercourse or whatever, you know.
The computer is now the most ubiquitous tool, machine, that human society has ever created. The most ubiquitous. It is everywhere.
Kirkpatrick Sale is a neo-Luddite, staunchly anti-technology. He's written 8 books and has never used a computer.
I feel that it is a loathsome machine, and it makes me ill even to contemplate it, so I won't use it.
How much does Kirkpatrick Sale hate computers?
I do it as a metaphor, a wake-up call to people who think that there is no downside to these computers and that everything is wonderful. I'm certain that we are about to experience more and more of the horrors of the downside of this computer.
Sale knows he can never smash enough computers to change the future of technology, but maybe he can change people's minds about their future with technology.
I've smashed dozens of them. It still has no effect upon computers. There's no way to escape it.
This computer will customize a drug specifically for your condition.
We are literally encased by a technological world. I think that if anybody really sat and thought about it, they would realize that their entire survival, everything from where they get their food to how they amuse themselves, is completely dependent on mass technologies.
Gary Kasparov has arrived.
In the spring of 1997, an IBM computer named Deep Blue presented the first serious challenge to the world's greatest human chess player. Never had so much international attention been paid to a chess championship. Would Garry Kasparov, the grandest grandmaster of all, be able to outplay a computer capable of thinking through 400 million positions per second? But if chess were simply a game of calculation, there would obviously be no contest. But Kasparov believed he could beat the computer because chess is strategy, and great players often win because they sense how their opponent will move.
We should recognize that the machine was fighting a world champion who was trying his best, and the machine was at the level. That's why I believe that this match could have a major importance in order to compare 2 different approaches. One is the approach of the machine, and another one is the approach of a human being. Because we played nearly equal chess in that match, but having a totally different set of mind.
Deep Blue has resigned, and Garry Kasparov has won the first game of the rematch. And
World champion Kasparov did win the first match, bolstering his contention that great chess was not simply a matter of mathematical calculation. But something about that first match was disturbing. The computer seemed to know more about Kasparov's style of play than he did.
And then the game 2 was played. I didn't play a good game of chess. I mean, I played something very awful.
That Gary tried to do against me.
It's not only about losing or winning this game. It was about my psychological status for the rest of the match. Because machine went on long thinking.
Not only was the computer making brilliant moves, it also seemed to be learning from its mistakes, sinking Kasparov into deeper and deeper psychological turmoil with every move. Later, Kasparov would say the computer played like a god.
Maybe it was just a machine, but you know, at that time I couldn't even listen to the rational arguments. The move that machine made, the move h7, h5, it was a purely human, you know, it had a lot of human logic.
All these variations, and he has designed. Gary Kasparov has designed the position.
All his strategies throughout the match was how to beat the fastest computer. After game 2, he was surprised. He was shocked. How can the computer play like a grandmaster? And I think he never recovered from that event.
I'm not afraid of any opponent, even emotionless computer. But I'm afraid of the unknown qualities. And that was something that I couldn't figure out during the match, and that's why I was afraid.
It was frightening indeed to play a machine that had suddenly become human in the mind of its opponent.
Machine very often is finding the best moves, the moves that I would find, and we have to understand how come that the machine with no positional knowledge, with no understanding of the game, just purely calculating and using this computing power, comes to the same conclusion. I believe that the approach is irrelevant, the result is everything. Now, if machine gets to the same result, this is a form of artificial intelligence.
In the sixth and decisive game of the match, Deep Blue opened playing the white pieces, giving it a slight tactical advantage. In a mere 19 moves, incredibly, it was all over for Gary Kasparov.
And whoa! Deep Blue, Kasparov, after the move c4, has resigned.
It raises the idea of thinking machines and makes people think a lot about what that means. What does the idea of an intelligent machine mean for the future of mankind?
Everybody is very concerned about the future role that computers will play in our life, because it will affect everybody's lives. How can you compare a computer, quote-unquote, intelligence with humans? Every normal comparison will fail because we're so different. Suddenly, chess was able to provide a unique measure of these two different powers, because there was a result. Somebody wins, somebody loses. And that's why I was a great proponent of man versus machine contest.
And therein lies the question we must ask and answer in the future. How different are we from the technology we create? What do we as human beings bring to the table of existential experience that a computer will never duplicate?
I have never had much interest in chess. Why waste all that mental effort on something that is so prescribed and routine that it can be done better by a computer? I would rather spend my time on something creative. Computers can't do this. They are very good at exploring the consequences of rules, like in chess, but at least at the moment, they can't invent the rules. Until they can, they won't deserve the description, artificial intelligence. We humans should be creative while we can. We may soon be overtaken.
Next on Sightings, will we remain the dominant species on the planet, or will biology and technology merge, creating a new species that will rule the world?
In the not too distant future, it'll be a robot world, not a human world.
Science fiction movies, from Metropolis to Terminator, have had a vision of the future where robots are intelligent, sinister machines hell-bent on destroying their creators. Well, real robots created in labs around the world right now seem to have the same potential. So the question is, will humans still have the ability to pull the plug in the next millennium?
My own feeling is that in the not too distant future, we're going to have machines that are more intelligent than humans, particularly when we look at networks of machines. Now, if that's the case, then we're going to have a future where machines will be controlling things, robot machines, rather than humans. It'll be a robot world, not a human world. We'll be very much second-class citizens.
There's no controversy about the fact that computers and robots are engineered. And yet, if robots and computers become as capable and as intelligent as human beings, then effectively we may have engineered our successors. And the biology, in fact, will be just a footnote.
Do we have anything to fear from a future world dominated by robot intelligence? Judging by the way humans have dominated our subordinate species in the past, the answer is yes.
How do we treat cows? How do we treat sheep? Well, we put them on farms. When they get to a certain age, we kill them. That's how we treat the other animals. We certainly don't treat them equally and give them a vote in elections. I mean, we'd be crazy giving cows a vote in our elections and so on. So when we look to a future with machines being more intelligent than humans, are they going to give us a vote in their elections? Well, no, they'd be crazy to do that. What are they going to do? That we're going to have human zoos and human farms.
There are, of course, many positive benefits to robotics in our society, from manufacturing to farming, in space exploration and hazardous waste disposal. They will be indispensable tools in the future, but is it realistic to expect them ever to do more than we program them to do? Can robots ever be human?
We have the Honda P2 robot, which can walk around just like a human for about 15 minutes. It can push carts, it can walk up and down stairs. So physically, we've got things that look like humans, they're the same size and they walk around a bit like humans. In terms of intelligence, then robots are still some way away.
Recent breakthroughs in cybernetics mean that in 20 years, robots will exist with brain power equal to our own.
Some people say, why should we build robots that are going to put us out of a job, that are going to make humans obsolete? One of these days, we're going to build a robot so big, someone will say, is there a God? And the computer will say, yes, here I am. That's very dangerous. It is possible, now within a 50 to 100 year span of time, that we will have robots with their own goals, their own ideas about what life should be like. They could be dangerous to us. That's why I think we should always have the plug and be ready to pull it once we have machines that have a will of their own, that are stronger than us, that are perhaps smarter than us, and have desires other than our own.
Once we've switched on the first machine or machines that are more intelligent than we are, we probably won't get the chance to switch them off. We won't get the chance to say, hey, we got it wrong, let's think again about it. Because they're more intelligent than we are, they are in control of the situation.
How will they control us? Cybernetic researchers hope it will be through their superior intellect, but there are indications that we are more likely to be controlled through the forces of a soulless, unstoppable Terminator-like future. Downtown San Francisco, 1998. Mechanical gladiators are in a battle royal for human amusement. This is the work of SRL, Survival Research Labs. Its mastermind is Mark Pauline, a modern-day Dr. Frankenstein who builds destructive machines from scrap metal and government surplus. Pauline may be at the controls, but more often than not, control becomes a relative term.
We go back and kind of
flip through the pages of technology and go through what was done in military technologies, what was done in industrial technologies, and look at them and say, well, okay, you can take a jet engine and you can use it to fly a plane with, you can use it in a car or something like that. But on the other hand, why not take a jet engine and attach it to an enormous police whistle and use it to make a very, very loud, incredibly piercing, disturbing sound, and then inject diesel fuel into that and make sort of a flamethrower that provides a curtain of flame on the ground. I mean, these are the kind of things that the people that originally developed these devices would never really have considered.
A lot of thought and effort goes into making these machines as real as living creatures.
It seems like the machines take on not only just a personality, but they make decisions of their own, and you're amplifying that by doing everything wrong that you would normally do with machines. You're doing it on a really compressed time scale, and all sorts of accidents happen that can be easily attributed to the creation of a new life form.
Make no mistake, this new life form is programmed for destruction.
Any of the devices that we make, pretty much the bottom line is it has to be visibly apparent that they could kill you instantly if something should go amiss. They're very powerful machines, and we maybe don't have the luxury of really dealing with the safety issues like a regular laboratory would make. There's a lot of fear involved too. You have to be very careful around machines like this. You know, I think the relationship again is more like you're dealing with wild animals, really.
The robots will become increasingly flexible, increasingly more initially animal-like and then human-like, adaptable, basically.
SRL doesn't just operate remote-controlled robots. They have also adapted military technology to operate their war machines through the internet from anywhere in the world.
It's a track robot that has essentially treads to make it move around, so it'll be able to go over some rough terrain, which is sometimes an obstacle. It's a pretty dexterous machine. We'll be able to come up to things and very precisely align it and actually maneuver things. And there's a video camera on as well, and there's an audio feed. So people will basically get sort of some of the sense of being there. They'll have audio and video, and they'll actually be able to reach out and grab at people and objects and things during the show. One of the things that we've been talking about is actually putting some type of device that would actually cause projectiles to be expelled from it. It's almost like a gun. People could actually target things remotely and essentially annihilate them.
The Internet control system was developed out of necessity when Japan refused to allow SRL to operate explosive devices during the Tokyo performance.
We basically use it as a way to circumvent the gun laws in Japan, where we had a device in San Francisco, which was a high-pressure gas launcher, which was firing at targets here in San Francisco, and we were operating that in Japan by pressing buttons on a button robot. So we are operating a very dangerous machine.
The concern, of course, is that even if you respect the chaos these machines can create, a hacker might not.
People obviously have a fascination with hacking into machines and stealing data, but obviously if someone hacks in or takes control of a physical machine and uses it towards their own ends, I mean, what really is the implication? I mean, who are these people that are controlling this? You don't know if it's friend or foe, and this is pretty much what's going on in the military.
In fact, the military of the future is one that will fight with the lethal combination of robots, computers, and ammunition.
We're doing things in robotics. We're doing things in what's called battlefield visualization, which is the effort to try to give the commander a better picture of what's going on, which has been one of the things commanders throughout history have wanted to know. What we're doing is trying to apply information technology, sometimes referred to as digitization of the battlefield, to allow us to bring the power of the computer to the commander.
The idea is to keep the human being out of harm's way.
Eventually getting to a robot that is small enough that a soldier could carry it, maybe in their backpack or a special case they would have. So you go 10 miles out into the battlefield and start dropping off your robots, who then go and find strategic places to watch the enemy. Those small robots can then communicate back to the larger mothership, and who can communicate back to the commander feed that data into the battlefield visualization, the situational awareness, and you close the loop. So we've taken humans out of harm's way using machines that if they are lost, it's much less of a loss than a human life or someone being wounded.
It's called fuzzy logic, a primary form of artificial intelligence that allows unmanned vehicles to be controlled from a distant, safer location.
We're using fuzzy logic, for example, to control maybe a robotic helicopter. So we're not just talking about ground vehicles, but something that might be flying through the air. And in Japan and in the United States, there are already robotic vehicles of this type, helicopters. They're maybe 6 feet long that can carry a payload of cameras, communications equipment, other things.
The ultimate goal is to not only take humans out of harm's way, but also out of the loop.
Right now, much of the robotic work, unless it's a routine, follow the same course type of thing, has some human in the loop. We're looking at situations where the human's outside the loop, and then you have situations where you want to have the robots working together.
But with humans out of the loop, who's calling the shots? Especially once artificial intelligence outstrips that of humans. Kevin Warwick likens it to IBM's Deep Blue beating Garry Kasparov at chess.
I think it's a very big event that it is a bastion of human intelligence that machines have now surpassed. Particularly if you look rather at a game of chess, the same scenario on a battlefield or in a military strategy. Now we pit a human brain against a machine brain, and if we're saying there that the machine brain can outwit, can outmaneuver, can outplan the human brain, then we're looking at military strategies for the future being intelligent machines fighting intelligent machines and no human involvement, because the machines can think better in that way.
And if future wars are going to be fought by robot warriors and computerized weapon dispensers carrying deadly payloads, what will the human role be in all of this? Could there ever be enough security to prevent urban terrorism or an insane threat from an unstable world leader?
We're trying to expose some of the elements that are going to come out as consequences of research into robotics, telerobotics, and there's certainly a number of empowering things. I mean, certainly if you could visit a remote place and interact, that's a very interesting thing, but we also here are more concerned with the actual interactions that are perhaps more lethal.
Imagine it, a destructive machine, perhaps an unmanned fighter jet with a lethal payload, controlled over the internet. Just pull the plug, you say. Well, it may not be that simple, since a machine with artificial intelligence would certainly have knowledge of the basic rule of natural law, known as survival of the fittest.
If a machine tries to keep itself alive by shooting or killing anything that tries to switch it off or kill it, fine, that's all right from a machine point of view. It's trying to keep itself alive. From a human point of view, it could be humans that are being killed, but that's bad from a human moral standpoint, but good from a machine moral standpoint.
A future where the weapons of mass destruction are controlled by artificial or machine intelligence is a frightening thought. Yet there is hope in the belief of many technologists that perhaps the weapons we build will be so intelligent they will choose not to fight each other.
What happens when robots become more intelligent than humans?
The machines will take over ultimately, and it may not be that bad.
Thinking machines that one day may rule the world. Next on Sightings.
One of the most disturbing aspects of the future is already here. Time appears to be speeding up. A factory built to last forever is obsolete in 50 years. The computers we bought just a few years ago aren't even worth keeping for spare parts. And technological advances that should be the stuff of science fiction are already on the drawing boards.
I think we're looking at 10 years when a single computer has the same brain capacity as a human brain. But computers have the big advantage that they can be networked together, and really the brain that you're looking at in a computer or machine brain is not a single brain, it's a whole network communicating very rapidly. So I think it's not such a clear picture, but 10 years and we're in a bit of a problem area, I think.
At the Department of Cybernetics at Reading University in England, Kevin Warwick directs a project aimed at empowering machines to think for themselves. And just like a human baby, before a robot can walk, it must learn to crawl. This robot has not been programmed to move forward. It has only been given enough information to, hopefully, allow the infant robot to figure it out for itself.
Come on, Alma, pick yourself up, girl. Inside, she's learning literally how to walk, how to organize herself in terms of the 6 legs for that particular goal, for that particular thing.
Within 10 minutes, the robot Warwick affectionately calls Elma has learned how to walk with confidence, just a fraction of the time it takes a human baby.
It's only a small demonstration in terms of its walking, and the robot can learn how to do that. In terms of learning generally, if a robot can learn that particular thing, there's nothing to stop robots, machines learning anything, essentially.
As the world's leading expert in cybernetics, Professor Warwick is keenly aware of the implications that this research will have, and is calling for an international robot anti-proliferation treaty.
I don't see any problem with me looking in the area, with researching in the area. I think that's good. We have to find out what the problems are. It's perhaps more the defense interests and the commercial interests where everything for them is more progress and staying one step ahead. In the university world, one can say, hey, there could be a problem here, let's watch what we're doing.
But will any machine, no matter how intelligent, ever really be able to usurp its human creators?
I think a sufficiently intelligent entity will be able to manipulate us any way it wants, probably without us even knowing it. But on the other hand, a sufficiently intelligent entity, especially one that's descended from us, is likely to think about us once in a while, and may in fact give us a kind of existence in its thoughts that's more secure than anything we could have done just with our own limited minds. So I think, yes, the machines will take over ultimately, and it may not be that bad. They make us into different people, and I think it's all fine and good on that level. I mean, at a certain point, if machines reach beyond just being helpmates and they become, you know, something along the lines of Terminator robots, then it's a whole different ball game. Part of the reason that I proceed in the area here in SRL is, like, I'd like to think that in the future battlefield, I'll be out there and a Terminator robot will walk up to me with a huge weapon and point it at me and look at me and say, hey, that's Mark Pauling, and he'll come up and shake my hand, and then he'll blow me away.
If computers and robots are poised to take over the world, perhaps we should be thinking, if you can't beat them, join them.
We can expect biological and electronic components to come together in the future to create superorganisms that will be a new form of life. But for this to be possible, we have to develop a better interface between them.
Human-computer interface has long been a staple of science fiction. And if we see the human brain as an internal hard drive and brain cells as organic microprocessors, it seems likely that someday we will be able to turn on, tune in, and upload.
We're talking about being able to have devices which will hook up directly to the human brain. However, the brain is going to remain a mystery for many decades to come. There are as many brain cells in the brain as there are stars in the galaxy.
the fastest supercomputer known to mankind is still at least 1,000 times slower than, the stupidest human being. So the computer is a stupid beast by any stretch of the imagination. But it is becoming smarter at a rate of about 1,000 a decade, and that seems to be, the current rate. That might well accelerate in the future. We expect a computer by 2015 to have roughly the same memory capacity as you do, and we expect it also around about the same time, plus or minus 5 years, to have the same intelligence.
At the moment, the best we can do to transfer information is a computer screen in one direction and a keyboard in the other. Both of these have a low baud rate, or rate of data flow.
It's a very archaic system that we have at the moment, and most people get very, very annoyed with the interface they have to the computer. They feel like taking an axe to it every now and again. We just have a terrible handle on interfacing computers to people at the moment.
In Ipswich, England, the Research and Development Department at British Telecom isn't waiting for technology to catch up. Recently, they announced that a microchip small enough to be placed undetected behind the human eye is not only theoretically possible, it's also likely to happen within our lifetime. The microchip is called the soul catcher.
Our speculation, we thought that, well, what if we've got really smart machines? What if we've got this nice interface between us and the machine which allows us to think in the machine world in a computer which is 1,000,000 times smarter than us? Doesn't that mean that we're 1,000,000 times smarter too? Then we're effectively a different species.
Theories vary on how the merging of man and machine will be accomplished.
What is needed is something like a direct electrical connection to the brain. This has actually been suggested for me to solve my particular communication problem. But I don't fancy wires attached to my head. Quite apart from the risk of infection, I would like to keep my thoughts to myself.
We now know how to interface with individual cells. But the interface with the human brain is still impossible. There are literally hundreds of millions of connections that we simply don't know how to decipher them. We simply do not know which neuron connects to which brain cell. But again, on a scale of 50 years, 50 to 100 years, we're in that realm now where we can begin to tease apart, nerve for nerve, the way in which our brains are hooked together.
I, for one, wouldn't want to queue up to get surgery to have a chip implanted in my head. It's something about us which resists that much of a link to the machines. But if it's something which is just an intuitive understanding by the machine, it's much less threatening. It's something you can walk away from if you don't like it.
What BT Labs suggests is that this new man-machine species, Homo cyberneticus, wouldn't be achieved by a direct computer connection. Instead of being hardwired into your brain, the computer would be able, through electromagnetic impulse, to read your mind.
So you could build up a model of the brain which works exactly the same way as your brain on a very smart computer outside, which would be no trivial task at all. But say 30, 35, 40 years in the future, we could probably do that. Now that's very exciting indeed, because then just by thinking, you can have that thought emulated in the outside computer, and you do then have a definite way of having this direct brain link.
We're a long way from even being able to consider the recording of consciousness. We don't yet know what consciousness is, what it constitutes. That's still one of the big arguments in the emerging science of artificial intelligence. What is intelligence? We don't know how human beings work, so we're not quite sure what we're supposed to be modeling.
To download a human mind onto a computer, we would have to understand how the brain and intelligence work. But if we could do that, we could design a much better mind, free from all the encumbrances that evolution has left us with. So why bother with human minds?
In less than 40 years, we've gone from punch cards to computers with voice recognition. Computers with mind recognition are probably not far behind.
It will be possible to achieve an intuitive link between man and machine just by you thinking something, and you'll effectively have much higher intelligence than you've really got. That will be achieved. It's only a matter of time.
Imagine that we could go back and implant one of these things for one day in Einstein, and then get it back to the time machine and run it back. We're sitting there, Einstein has stopped, he's looking at a tree. He looks at the tree for 15 minutes and then he walks on. What we all want to know is, what was he thinking about? Which we don't know. So we're not talking about recording consciousness, we're talking about television.
Researchers say they are not so much interested in recording information as the reverse, implanting global intelligence at will.
When we achieve this transparent link between the man and the machine, what we're connecting to is a phenomenally sophisticated device which is very, very intelligent indeed, which is connected to the global superhighway and has got access to all of mankind's accumulated intelligence and all the intelligence generated since by smart computers. And we will have access to that just by thinking ourselves. That's a very exciting technology indeed, but it's also frightening, and we would want to proceed down that path with great caution.
I would jump at the chance to do it. I would literally leap a wide chasm in order to be able to do that. And I would probably be even more likely to do it if it was reversible in some way. I don't think that you would have any shortage of takers.
BT Labs estimates that they will be downloading images from the brain by 2025.
I'd be very curious to see what the output from one of these devices would be like. That would be one of my main problems with what BT is proposing. I don't think we see what's coming in through the optic nerve as straight input. I think it's probably going through a sort of infinite number of filters, some of which are cultural, so that there, you know, we all know that there are things which we see and yet we don't see. But this device would record everything we saw. It's actually a sort of discorporate concept.
Many see the device as a weapon, a way of controlling human thought, but others see its potential in a much more positive light.
The possibility of downloading into the computer and having a conscious experience as an alternative to death is you know, something to look forward to, is something that might happen. I mean, stuff that sounds insane right now is probably going to happen in another 15 or 20 years.
Have we finally found the way to cheat death?
If you sign up and it works, you will be able to see a future world with remarkable advances in technology.
Will we be a species of immortals? Next on Sightings.
Planned obsolescence. It's built into most of the machinery of the 20th century. And let's face it, it's built into us too. No one lives forever. At least not yet.
Some people, as they're getting older, think that maybe if I freeze my body, then 100 years from now, a cure will be found for cancer.
This could be your body in the next century. It's a practice as old as the ancient Egyptians, who used mummification to preserve the physical body for the next life. Now, the preferred method is cryonics, chemical freezing. But the goal is the same, to make death nothing more than an intermission between lives. If an animal can be created from a few spare cells today, surely in the future we will discover how to duplicate, perhaps even reanimate ourselves.
You're looking at the body of a 50-year-old man who has just moments ago been pronounced dead of colon cancer. And these people are medical personnel from the American Cryonics Society, with whom he contracted to be frozen right here in his own living room. Alerted by cell phone, they have arrived within moments of his death to begin the process of cryonic preservation.
Serious consideration of cryonics first began in the 1960s, when research scientists experimented with the reanimation of frozen organisms. Early success with insects led to similar successes with frogs, then hamsters, then dogs, bolstering the notion that the same process could also work for humans. In the 1980s, frozen embryos became living, breathing babies, furthering the cause of cryonics as a viable method of not just preservation, but perhaps also suspended animation. Research scientist Ralph Merkel is one of the leading advocates for the cryonics movement.
I think that's one of the major misconceptions that people have about cryonics is freezing dead people. And the answer is no, we're freezing people, and whether or not they're dead remains to be seen. If in fact they can be revived, then in fact they were never dead. Today's medical technology often can't keep us alive, let alone healthy. Cryonic suspension is an imperfect method of preserving ourselves into the future when there will be a technology, a medical technology, able both to reverse the damage caused by the cryonic suspension and to restore good health.
To live forever. That's certainly my goal, and I think that's the goal. Well, it's very least to extend our lifespans as far into the future as possible, and with a lot of luck and with a lot of research, that just might be forever. But cryonics is only a life net. Cryonics will get the patient who is dying today to the medical technology of the future.
We are watching the patient being packed in ice as the cooling down process is begun. In this first stage, he will be ventilated. Medications such as anticoagulants, antioxidants, and other drugs, his temperature, blood gases, and so on, will be constantly monitored, and his blood will gradually be pumped out and replaced with water-based coolants.
The freezing of an entire human body using 20th century technology is laborious, expensive, and, say some cryonics researchers, completely unnecessary.
There's a lot of choices on how one can be frozen. The cheapest way to be frozen is by going head only. And since we're pretty sure that almost everything that makes us up is contained within our head, memories, personality, and such stuff, growing a new body shouldn't be that hard. For example, you know about Dolly, and that was a case where a single cell was used to grow a whole animal again. So the single cells have got all the information that you need to grow a new copy of yourself. I'm personally signed up for the economy job, which involves head only. But most of the people that I've helped freeze, their bodies were in such bad shape that that's probably building them a new one is a good idea.
Over a period of up to a week, the patient's temperature will gradually be lowered as he is placed in a series of tanks and cooling boxes filled with liquid nitrogen. Ultimately, all his blood will be washed out and replaced by a combination of medically treated coolant liquids and ice. And finally, encased in a tube, he will be lowered into his permanent resting place in this vacuum vault, which will then be placed underground to await the day he returns to life.
I certainly wouldn't pay to be cryogenically preserved. Even supposing it was possible to reanimate people, which I very much doubt, why should the people that have taken your money go to the bother? And even if one was brought round, one would have lost all the electrical activity in the brain, and probably much of one's memory and personality.
So your body may come back, but your consciousness, your essence, may not. And you will have no idea what scientists are doing with your cells.
In the future, with molecular manufacturing, we'll be able to arrange the atoms exactly as we want and precisely the pattern we want.
It's called nanotechnology. It's a technology of the near future that will work at the molecular level and has the potential to create nearly anything by the structural rearrangement of atomic matter. Is it even possible to imagine what could be created from a rearrangement of the protons, neutrons, and electrons that used to be you?
Disease and ill health are caused by damage at the molecular and cellular level. Today's surgical tools are very large and crude at that level. But in the future, we'll be able to make surgical tools that are molecular, both in their size and precision. And for the first time, we'll be able to intervene at the level where the damage actually occurs and correct that damage. One thing you might be able to do in the future would be to have a fleet of very small molecular-sized machines that you inject into the body. They'd circulate through the tissues, and when they found something that was wrong, they would correct it. This will create a revolution in our medical capabilities.
Nanotechnology is the reason I got into cryonics. I had this view of cryonics, which I'd known about for a very long time, as being like a frozen tomato. When you defrosted it, it would just fall to pieces into total mush. But then when you start dealing with things like nanotechnology, it's no big deal to go in and seal up all the cell walls. You're dealing with tools which are so small that a cell is enormous by comparison.
The laws of physics say that molecular machines are possible. Maybe incredibly difficult, but possible. And that's why some people rely on nanotechnology to solve all the problems that we cannot solve with any other technology. However, my attitude is, let me see it. I'll believe it when I see it.
But, warn the cryonicists, playing the waiting game won't do you any good when you're dead. Unless, of course, you're waiting in a stainless steel tube in sub-freezing suspension.
I know several people who have arranged for their future cryonic suspension. I think the odds are getting good enough so that it's almost sort of worth it. I consider the whole enterprise to be rather immature at this point, and yet I'm glad they are doing it, because 10 years from now I will very likely change my mind, because someone is doing the foolish early experiments. We may all benefit. So I'm glad they're out there doing what they're doing, even though I think they're nuts.
They're one of two possibilities. Either cryonics works or it does not. And either you sign up for cryonic suspension or you don't. Now, if you sign up and it works, then you will be able to see a future world with remarkable advances in technology. If you don't sign up or it doesn't work, well, that's pretty much the same as the current situation.
Next on Sightings, a future with limitless possibilities of hope and great advances for humanity.
This is the most fascinating moment in the history of this planet.
In an uncertain future, apocalypse is easy. It's human nature to hope for the best and expect the worst. To put it in the context of our shared future, people are just not programmed to unconditionally embrace the unknown.
The reason this millennium is different from other millennial expectations in the past is that technology can now actually deliver extinction or transformation to the human race. It no longer is something we talk about. It's something some of us are doing.
We have indeed reached the crossroads of humanity and technology. Now the question becomes, which way do we turn at this millennial intersection?
I have predicted, and I have laid down bets on this, that by the year 2020, we will have a worldwide crisis that will threaten the existence of the human species. If the computer revolution just goes on in the way it's going on, human species is probably doomed by 2020.
This is a different kind of doomsday scenario from those of the past. The four horsemen of the apocalypse are now named greed, power, fear, and technology. And the world will be increasingly divided between the haves and have-nots, those who have access and those who do not.
Societies are being torn apart. Stable countries that have held together for centuries are now just collapsing under the pressure of a global economy that is driven by the computer.
We are at war. You know, the society that we're living in is ever expanding in order so that it can function. And that's a war, and at the edges of that war are indigenous people all over the world who are struggling for their own sustainability against it, and it's pushing onto them.
Man is being destroyed by his machines. Man is using chaos and the division of races to destroy himself. Today, we humans divide everything because we think we are better than the one who created everything.
Clearly, it's naive to imagine that humanity can ever turn back the clock. But in the post-computer age, it's well to remember that human innovation is still no match for the awesome power of nature. we will always be at the mercy of hurricanes, floods, and earthquakes. So respecting the planet's ultimate domination, says Don Sanchez, will be our salvation.
Por eso nosotros les enseñamos a leer el libro abierto.
All the modern technology that man has today doesn't do any good when it comes to predicting earthquakes. And all things made by this technology gets destroyed.
And in the midst of rampant technological advancement, there are signs that even the most ardent supporters of a plugged-in universe still crave a primal human connection. At the Burning Man Festival in Nevada, techno-junkies turn in their computers and forsake their internet connections for one weekend a year to create a bizarre world that may be a window on the future. Is this the need for human contact in a world of isolation, or the first signs of a world gone mad?
In Burning Man, you can see that there's actually the evolution of genuine eccentricity, you know, a genuine surrealism happening. The ability of individuals to be able to encompass that is probably the primary hope of evolution. An evolution where human beings are still participants rather than just playthings or pets for the machine overlords.
Esa vibración es para encontrarnos.
We must help all others to evolve to a higher level. I believe that we are finishing the 3 stages of man, and we are evolving to a superman.
From a shaman on an Andean mountaintop to a researcher developing intelligent robots, the message is the same. We are on the cusp of a new era, and attention must be paid to where we're going before we get there.
So I don't think people will be much different in 30 to 40 years. But 150 to 200 years is another matter. We might not recognize ourselves.
Historians of the future, looking back, will say, oh, what a wonderful time it was when humanity made the transition from being passive observers of nature to active choreographers of nature.
Science and technology have led us into places that we haven't seen before, and we need to take that very seriously and look at what we think the consequences and moral import of the various issues are. So, and we can do that and be excited and afraid, and I think we should be both.
We should be not scared, but exalted, excited, fascinated. This is the most fascinating moment in the history of this planet. This is payday that we're talking about.
To be sure, the merging of humans and machines raises profound and for some frightening questions about who or what will be in control of the future. But in a strange way, the more we come to depend on technology, the more human we become. Let the computers of the world calculate, sort, and copy. We can practice compassion, explore our own creativity, and play baseball. For this special edition of Sightings, I'm Tim White.
Tomorrow, don't miss an all-new Sci-Fi Channel special. He has been described as one of the 20th century's most important science fiction writers. Meet the prolific, the influential, the always controversial Harlan Ellison on Masters of Fantasy at 10 a.m. Eastern. Now, programmed for pleasure, reprogrammed to kill, the high-tech combatants of a futuristic theme park have gone offline. It's time to bring in the outsider next.